Hey guys, today we're in the book of First Chronicles chapter 26. So David has been organizing things at the last part of his life to get the temple ready. He got all of the materials ready. He's organized the Levites as a whole. He's organized the priests of the Levites. He's organized the musicians. And now today he organizes the gatekeepers. Now, once again, when we say gatekeepers, it's not necessarily somebody sitting at a gate. You would think of this as the workers of the temple. It could involve somebody sitting at the gate, but it also involves the police. And not just the physical police of keeping out people who shouldn't be in, but also the spiritual police. People keeping things in areas holy, that they would not be disturbed, they would not be touched, as well as all of the workings. There would have to be people who would have to watch and oversee the water gatherers, the wood gatherers, which were slaves of Israel, would have to keep people around the walls, would have to, during big holidays where people would come in, like Passover, Feast of the Tabernacles, Pentecost, things like that, where people would literally just be shoulder to shoulder. There has to be some kind of peace and organization in that structure. And these are the gatekeepers. So just don't think of somebody sitting by a gate. This is a lot of people in a lot of different jobs. And much like everything else that David does, he gives some organization to them. And so we see in verse 1, these are the divisions for the gatekeepers. I just want to say, you notice in verse 1, it says the sons of Korah and the sons of Asaph. This is not Asaph, the musician that we saw in the previous chapter. This is another guy. And so just don't be confused by that. And so a lot of this chapter is just giving us a lot of names that we really don't know of who they are and how they're divided. But look at verse 12. It says, the divisions of the gatekeepers corresponding to their chief men had duties just as their brothers did, ministering in the house of the Lord. This is an important part. Because in our minds, we think in a worldly manner. And what I mean by that is, once again, all of these men are Levites. They're called by God. They're separated by God. They have not been given an inheritance of land. And all of their work is to further the worship of God. And so people would think, well, you have the priest, and then you have you have the priest, then you have certain families of the Levites, then you'd have the musicians, and then you have the gatekeepers, and then you have the military, and you have the police, and then you have leaders of each one. And in our minds, we think in a hierarchy structure. And it's very important when we read verse 12 here that there is not a hierarchy structure. There is an organization, but there's not in how God views them. Notice once again, it says, just as their brothers did, ministering in the house of the Lord. They were all called by God and were all given different giftings so that they can serve. Much like Paul writes in Corinthians, right? Is the eye better than the mouth? Is the hand better than the foot? They're all gifted different, and God views them all the same. It's a part of the body. And so it's important here that the chronicler puts this in. Not only does David see this, but even now to these new Israelites who are rebuilding the temple, Jerusalem, they're setting up everything again, that there is not a hierarchy. To remind them, this is for what God sees, not for what we see. Okay, so it's very important. So not only does he give spiritual duties and non-spiritual duties and spiritual police and physical police, but also we see in verse 20 that he puts people over the treasuries, right? Remember, that's a part of what it would take. Solomon's going to need money, and the temple will need money in order for it to work. And so there's leaders of the treasuries and the dedicated gifts of the Lord. And then once again, in the very last verse of chapter 26, Notice it says that King David appointed and his brothers 2,700 men of ability, heads of the fathers' houses, to have oversights of the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Messianites, right? Remember, where are these people at? All right, so you got to think back all the way back to the book of Joshua. Where are these Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh? These are on the eastern side of the Jordan River. These are outside of the land of Israel, right? Remember, they were crossing over. They asked Moses, hey, we want to stay here. Don't make us go into the promised land. This land is great. And God told Moses, that's fine, but they had to go over and help take over the promised land. And they did that, and now they all returned. David, in his wisdom, his godly wisdom, God-given wisdom, he not only took Levites to run Jerusalem and Israel and all this works, but he took 2,700 Levites and he put them over in the eastern part of the Jordan, in the land that is not the promised land, right? He put them among the 2.5 tribes of Israel. For what reason? To keep them holy, right? He understood what Moses was afraid of, what Joshua was afraid of, and what God warned them of, that because they are on the other side of the Jordan, because they are not in the promised land, they will find it very easy to have excuses to not go to Jerusalem, to not go to the temple, to not do the things that God wants. They're farther away from their father, so they're going to play and do what they want. And so David, in his godly wisdom, says, hey, I'm going to send 2,700 good Levites over to your land to help you stay on track, right? To help you to do the things that you're supposed to do, to not let you make excuses, not let you to get off, not let you to be lazy, but to keep you on board. And that's so important because we'll find out, or we've already found out, right? When this was writing, as David's writing this, we'll find out that these 2.5 tribes are the first ones taken by Assyria. These are the ones who give up easy because why? Because they were the farthest away from God. And so he knew that, he saw that coming. It did not help, but he tried his best. And so hope that makes a little bit more sense. And we'll see you tomorrow in chapter 27 in how he divides up the military. God bless.